South Africans are in danger as illegal migrants with extremist views take over the nation. These are the shocking findings that the South African government does not want you to know about. We live in a time where extremism and extremist attacks have run rampant across the world, the most recent one being an attack on Jewish people in Sydney. But unfortunately, South Africa is becoming increasingly at risk of falling victim to such atrocities. But before we get into the shocking findings that prove this, could I please remind you to subscribe to the channel? It's completely free, and all you have to do is click on the subscribe button below this video. Now let's get into it. So the other day, the DA released a press release in which it praised the Department of Home Affairs handling of illegal migrant deportations. So, of course, this is very welcome news, but it leaves out some very important information. So as we see in this document, in the 2024-25 financial year, 51,000 illegal immigrants were deported, an 18% increase on the previous year, and the highest figure in at least 5 years. Operation New Broom focused specifically on hotspot areas in metropolitan municipalities, with 6 operations conducted since it started, resulting in 1,400 successful arrests of illegal immigrants. And so this appears to be very good news, right? Because after all, it seems that the Home Affairs run by the DA's Leon Schreiber is clamping down on illegal migration into South Africa and ultimately handling the deportation of such individuals. But while the DA and the Government of National Unity presents this sort of good news, they are refusing to shed light on an incredibly alarming problem that South Africa has that needs to be addressed. What I'm talking about is the massive amount of illegals who have already entered the country and continue to enter the country. And while such deportations are helpful, they are doing very little to curb what's already happened. We see how Stats SA was quite angry with erroneous reporting on undocumented migrants in South Africa. So according to Stats SA, many sources were misquoting their figures or saying that there are far more undocumented migrants in South Africa than what Stats SA claims. But if we take a look here, Stats SA has claimed that if one uses the output of foreign-born persons enumerated in Census 2011 and adds it to the net international migrants for the period 2011 to 2016, as well as the period 2016 to 2021 from the 2021 mid-year population estimates, one would get an estimation of 3.95 million persons. And so ultimately what this means is that as of 2021, there were at least around 3.95 million illegal immigrants in South Africa. And as we know, that number must have only gone up since then. And so the illegal immigrants in South Africa make up an enormous portion of South Africa's population. But while many people view illegals as just being, ordinary people who maybe came from Zimbabwe or Namibia and decided to make a better life in South Africa, there is a dangerous element that's washing up on our shores. Take, for example, people who are arriving in South Africa from places where Islamic extremism thrives. So, here we have an article giving us a little update about the Palestinian refugees who arrived in South Africa. Now, I'm sure most of you know that 2 flights of Palestinian refugees arrived in South Africa. So the Gift of the Givers Foundation said the first flight that landed late last month carried 176 Palestinians. A second chartered plane, which made a stopover in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, brought in 153 Palestinian refugees. But South Africa's Border Management Authority denied them entry. Now, as we know, they eventually allowed them to disembark from the plane, and they were given entry ultimately. And while this may seem like a very small number of Palestinians, a little over 300, this is very problematic because, as Cyril Ramaphosa himself admitted, these flights with the Palestinians arrived mysteriously, and there was no actual knowledge on South Africa's side as to who these people were and how they got there. And this is incredibly dangerous Sure, the people could maybe all be innocent civilians hoping to flee a war zone, even though a ceasefire is in place already, but they could also be highly dangerous individuals, as we do know that Hamas is still very much in existence, even though it has been weakened in the war. So interestingly enough, Home Affairs took action by withdrawing the 90-day visa exemption following what it calls the abuse of Palestinian travelers. But what's really interesting to note here, and actually quite alarming, is the fact that they didn't seem to do so in order to protect South African safety. Rather, they did so to protect the Palestinians. And as we can see in this press release, it explains that following investigations and recommendations by national intelligence structures and consultations conducted within the security cluster, which confirmed the deliberate and ongoing abuse of the 90-day visa exemption for Palestinian ordinary passport holders by Israeli actors linked to voluntary immigration efforts for residents of the Gaza Strip, the Department of Home Affairs has withdrawn the exemption. Now, it's quite important to note here is that there isn't actually any true concrete evidence that these are Israeli actors. And if there were, I find it quite strange how Gift of the Givers and other Islamists such as Al-Majd decided to coordinate with Israelis, seeing as they detest them so much, in order to get the Palestinians out of the war zone. So ultimately, it's quite confusing. On one hand, you have the Gift of the Givers and Islamists saying, no, we needed to relocate the people for their safety. But then on the other hand, they're claiming that Israel is trying to cleanse them of the area. So which one is it? Moving on, we also see how Leon Schreiber decided to make quite a disturbing remark. He explained, when the most recent charter flight landed at OR Tambo International Airport, President Cyril Ramaphosa indicated that the travelers may have been flushed out of Gaza. Subsequent investigations have confirmed this to be the case. Withdrawing the visa exemption is the most effective way to prevent further flights of this nature, while ensuring that bona fide travelers from Palestine are safely able to visit South Africa without being subjected to abuse. South Africa will not be complicit in any scheme to exploit or displace Palestinians from Gaza. So Leon Schreiber of the DA has made it very clear that he's not interested in protecting South Africans from potential terror threats. Rather, that he is prioritizing the safety and well-being of Gazans, and that he is buying into this ridiculous narrative that somehow the Israelis are trying to flush them out. And so as we can see here, Schreiber really just seems to be an ANC puppet in this regard. I personally am completely unimpressed, and it's quite sad to see another DA minister not develop a backbone. But what's really more important for us to focus on, beyond any of the local politics, is the incredible danger that allowing so many migrants into the country enables. And I'm going to give you an example. So just this morning, at the time of recording this video, there was a horrific shooting on Bondi Beach. And as Australia's state broadcaster explains here, the police say that at least 12 people have been killed in a shooting near a Jewish gathering at Sydney's Bondi Beach. One shooter was killed while another is in custody. So as it explains in the updates over here, 29 people have been injured, including 2 police officers, and have been taken to various hospitals. A senior law enforcement official confirmed one of the gunmen was Naveed Akram from Bonnyrigg in Sydney Southwest. Now, if anybody goes onto Naveed's social media, it's very clear that he is a Muslim fundamentalist. So the shooting took place at a Hanukkah celebration, which is just underway. And the NSW police, which stands for New South Wales, also confirmed that it has been declared a terrorist incident. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese convened a national security meeting and described the shooting as a devastating terrorist incident. And finally, Australia's terror threat will remain at probable, meaning that ASIO, that is the Police Intelligence Service in Australia, considers there to be a 50-50 chance of a terror attack taking place. And so as you can see, here's an example of what happens when you allow people with radical values and ideologies into a country where their ideologies are just not compatible. But unfortunately, there are more examples in recent times that we have to go through. So just a few weeks ago, the UK was also home to a terror attack on the Jewish community, this time at a Manchester synagogue. And it also happened to be during a Jewish holiday, namely the holy day of Yom Kippur. So during this attack, the assailant, named Mohammed Asim Bashir, was arrested on 27th November at Manchester Airport. And what's really important for us to note here is that Bashir is a British national whose self-identified ethnicity is British Pakistani. Now, of course, this isn't just self-defined or self-identified. This is his background. And while, of course, there have been Pakistanis living in Britain for many years, there are, of course, those who are newer arrivals and those who are moderate, but also those who are extremist. And because there are such a large influx of people, it becomes very difficult to tell who are the extremists, who are the moderates, and the more people you let in, the higher the risk is, because, of course, people can slip through the cracks. But if you thought that these sorts of attacks were only against Jewish people, you'd be mistaken. In the United States, in late November, 2 National Guard members in the nation's capital were murdered by a suspect who is an Afghan national, as the Trump administration confirmed. And in response to this attack, the administration said it was pausing asylum decisions, re-examining green card applications for people from countries of concern, and halting visas for Afghans who assisted the US war effort. Now, what's incredibly important to note here is how different the South African response was compared to the US response. The DA's Leon Schreiber decided to protect the Palestinians rather than prioritize the safety of South Africans. He completely ignored the potential security threats that these people could pose and instead complained about how basically South Africa will not assist in the exile of these people from the Gaza Strip. But then he still goes and says how regular Palestinian visitors will be allowed in. So effectively nothing has been done. On the other hand, what we see with the Trump administration is that they've understood that this is a massive cause for concern. There are clearly many people with radical ideologies who are coming into the country, and they need to put a stop to this in order to curb the likelihood of further attacks. But unfortunately, South Africa is no exception to such terror attacks. A few years ago, there were Islamic State South African fighters in Mozambique, and these were known as the Tulsi Twins. If we take a look at what the Tulsi Twins did, they were the first South Africans to be arrested and charged for having IS links. According to South African security authorities, the twins were plotting to attack the US Embassy in Sandton, the UK High Commission, the South African Zionist Federation, and King David High School in Johannesburg, which is a Jewish school, and the South African military technology conglomerate, Denel. In addition, the Tulsi Twins contemplated targeting Jewish South African cartoonist Jonathan Shapiro, Jews who fought in Israel with the Israeli Defense Forces, and returned to South Africa a Jewish South African investment banker and an unidentified gay imam. Now, this is quite shocking because, as you can see, yes, they have targeted Jewish installations, but also ordinary non-denominational ones, such as Denel, such as the US Embassy, such as the UK High Commission. And so what we see here isn't just a war against Jewish people. It's a war against people whose ideologies are different from their own. And what's more, a large number of illegal immigrants in South Africa are Mozambican. And Mozambique is home to a rising number of Islamic extremists, particularly those of Islamic State, as mentioned in this article, and Al-Shabaab. Now, this is incredibly problematic because you have Palestinians coming in, the background of whom we do not know. You have people from Pakistan. You have people from Mozambique and other people who may not even be radical Islamists, but could be common criminals. And so, unfortunately, what's going on in South Africa is incredibly worrying. There seems to be this reluctance to take action against illegal migrants, and the more of them who are allowed in, the bigger the risk of such attacks happening. And you also need to ask yourself, why is it that South Africa and the West continue to allow these people in, yet moderate Muslim countries, such as the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Kuwait, and even Saudi Arabia, have refused to take in Palestinian refugees or Syrian refugees? And it is because they understand that these people are incompatible with moderate, reasonable Islam. and so in their minds, it is a matter of national security. Perhaps South Africa needs to learn to follow suit. Thank you very much for tuning into this video. If you found it informative, please remember to subscribe to the channel for more content. Until next time, I'm Matthew Cohen, and this is the Power Pod.